Welcome to Insights on Demand and to our session especially for those of you teaching learners in China, to today's Corpus Insights for Chinese speaking learners. In this session, we'll find out more about the Cambridge Learner Corpus, what it is, how it can help us, and what it tells us about learners both here and around the world. This talk showcases extensive data from Chinese learners. What do they find difficult? What is easy for them? How can we support them? Along with this, we look at how this compares to learners worldwide and explore more about how you can use insights from Cambridge Learner Corpus in your classroom. So let's get started. So what is a corpus? Over to the language research team to tell us more.
Imagine you had a question about language. Perhaps you could ask your friend. But what if their answer was different to yours? Maybe you could ask everyone in your town, or maybe you could ask everyone in your country. This is the basis of corpus linguistics. We analyse huge collections of language to find out how it behaves and how it works.
We use the corpus in two ways. So first, to find out how English is really used, and second, to find out the language support that our learners really need.
So we've got a huge range of things, going from informal family conversations around the dinner table to academic writing, to business English, to journalism, to text messages and emails, and all this allows us to have a really detailed understanding of how English behaves in lots of different contexts.
So much has changed in the world over the last 10 years, and that includes language, so we keep checking to make sure that our syllabus and our course materials is up to date to reflect those changes.
The Cambridge Learner Corpus is an unparalleled collection of learner writing.
Made up of about 180,000 real exam candidate scripts from about 200 countries around the world.
And this analysis gives us insight into how well the students perform, but also the support they need to improve.
We use the corpus to supply the language that learners need to fulfil their ambitions and potential.
So, as we heard in the video, a corpus is a huge collection of text that we can analyze to find out how language behaves. It's about data and evidence. We use it to check and validate our intuitions and to find out new things about language that perhaps we didn't know. And the Cambridge Learner Corpus, the world's largest collection of texts written by people learning English, it is made up of students' responses to the written sections of Cambridge English exams. The project has been running for over 20 years, and new texts are being added every day. It tells us what learners can do at each stage of their learning journey. The Cambridge Learner Corpus is unique because of its size and also because of its annotation scheme. The exam scripts in the corpus have been error-coded. A team of specialists have worked through each text and annotated any errors with computer-readable tags. This means that the corpus can easily be searched to find out where learners are successful in their use of English and where they typically struggle. And because we know lots of information about the students, what language they speak, where they are from, this helps us to find out about how particular groups of students learn English. This means that we can adjust our materials to spend more time on more difficult areas. And so, as you can see, we have learners from a huge number of language backgrounds. We have around about 5 million words of data for Chinese speaking learners across all CEFR levels. So let's look at those in more detail. So what exactly can the Cambridge Learner Corpus tell us about Chinese learners? First of all, let's start with the positives. What are they good at? Learning English can in some ways be a simpler task than some other world languages, depending of course on one's native language. English has lots of vocabulary which is well known internationally, since it has been borrowed from other languages, especially in science and technology. Another reason why English can be easy at first is that it does not have complicated morphology, which in the case of languages like Russian or Arabic and its alphabet is also well known internationally compared with, say, Chinese characters. Chinese is similar to English in that it also doesn't have grammatical gender or noun cases, or complicated verb-subject agreements. Finally, comparing Chinese learners with those in the world as a whole, Chinese learners make fewer errors in categories of spelling, word order, missing pronouns, and missing prepositions. Some errors that are distinct to Chinese learners are, for example, boss instead of employer. Another use of language which is to say informal. There are also several kinds of omission errors: missing game after play computer, missing and, the conjunction between two clauses, missing who in relative clauses, and missing be. Here missing is after there, for instance. A persistent problem is wrong verb tense. There are many varieties of this error, but it may be overuse of the present tense where past tense is required. For example, confusing is versus was, or it may be the use of the wrong modal verb. For example, will instead of would, or can instead of could. It could also be an error with complicated tense, such as the past perfect. Chinese don't have verb agreement between subject and object, so it's not surprising to see some of these errors here. One source of errors, which is often overlooked, is determiner errors, i.e. errors with the or are. These can involve missing them out, using them unnecessarily, or confusing the and are. Remember that the refers to countable items that have been referred to before, while the null determiner, not the, works with uncountable abstract nouns. Sometimes we just have to learn phrases containing the, if this works better than rules. Another category of errors we found in Chinese data was missing preposition. Although Chinese speakers are not the worst for this type of error overall, there are some specific ones which occur frequently for Chinese learners. These sometimes involve preceding verb like apply for, but other times involve preceding noun as the possessive of in 5 sets of photocopies. For possessive compounds, Chinese varies can have both orders. France King, 法国国王, or road's end, 陆地尽头, and sometimes use of an of particle, but sometimes not. The second kind of error we can look at is vocabulary errors. These become more prevalent for high-level learners. As the learners don't make as many grammatical mistakes, but continue to use the wrong words of various types. The most common of these is the use of wrong verbs. These can be modal verbs. Also, these can be simple light verbs used in collocation, e.g. is quality. Go and come are often confused, and in this case, come is used when it's assumed that they will meet at the target place, while go assumes they won't necessarily meet. We have 3 noun choice errors from the domain of employment, and we see that staff is used instead of employee. Where staff is more informal, also office is the specific location, whereas company isn't so specific. And working hours is a phrase used rather than time. Some more vocabulary observations. We notice that a lot of adverbs are mixed up. We can see overuse of very. There are some adjectives which can't take degree adverbs like very. So we have to use really instead. But we do not use very instead of so before most adjectives to indicate degree. Confusion between here and there could be due to English or to first language influence. More problems with the, see that the is used where a more specific determiner is better. We know that Chinese learners also have to watch out for underusing the. So these kind of errors are quite hard. When it comes to spelling, Chinese speakers do pretty well overall as compared to the worldwide average, but spellings are always a big issue for learners of English. Of course, we have the differences between English, British English, and American variations, as well as other variants like Australian, New Zealand, South African, Canadian, and so on. There are a lot of words. Are our learners so different? No. These are the error types that we see with Chinese speaking learners more often. Which of these are problems of other languages around the world? All of them. They may appear in different order around the world, but these error types feature in the top 20 of errors made by all learners everywhere. This means that when we use data from the corpus in our learning materials, it's relevant to all learners, because learning English is tough, it's challenging. Let's have a look at why. While it's often considered easier to start and grammatically simple, English can be hard for a lot of learners across the world. First, its spelling is complicated and hard to predict. as the words are often not written as they are pronounced. For example, the letters O, U, G, H can be pronounced about 5 different ways. Some patterns can be learned. For example, the saying I before E except after C, with the exception of neighbor. We will come back to spelling errors in a moment. Another problem of English is its large vocabulary, which means that learners may be confronted with new words and phrases, often with similar meanings and subtle differences. For example, handle versus manage versus deal with. Of course, English is spoken in many countries, so it has lots of regional variations and dialects. These may have different ways of saying the same thing. One of the toughest parts of English grammar can be the simple word the, since it is frequently used but often hard to predict, especially for languages which don't have similar definite articles. For some learners, English sounds can be hard to pronounce, such as the TH sound, the English R sounds, which depend on region, and also the diphthongs like O and E. What can we do with corpus data? We use the Cambridge Learner Corpus to inform all of our course books. Sometimes, like in this example, it appears on the page. We know that common learner errors can become fossilized if not addressed early on in the learning process. And so the accuracy check found in each unit the accuracy check found in each unit of Involve highlights common learner errors for that level as found in the Cambridge Learner Corpus, helping students avoid these errors in their speaking and writing. But actually, insights from learner corpuses throughout all of our learning materials. We use it to inform the curriculum, vocabulary, and grammar choices that we make. Here we can see how info on this type of error students make, in this case issues with prepositions, can make it onto the page as support for students. But what can you do? How can you use corpus-informed approaches in your teaching? We don't have lots of time to discuss this today. Why not watch Dr. Niall Curry's talk as part of this Insights on Demand event? Niall shares useful tools that you can use to work with corpora yourself and some guidelines to help you get started with corpus linguistics. Check out our other talks on corpus linguistics too, as part of this event on areas like spoken English, language change, and EML. And that's it. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you have any further questions or comments that we haven't addressed in the chat box and comments thread, head over to the event Padlet and leave your questions there. Here's the link for you to post. And it should be posted in the chat box too. All right, guys, once again, thank you very much for joining and listening to today's talk.